So if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that one of my main goals is not just to show you that the Bible is an absolutely fascinating masterpiece, but also to give you practical advice and tips how you can study this book in such a way that you're able to interpret it correctly and discover really amazing things that are also deeply relevant for your life. And most of the time, I try to do that by telling you what really works and what you therefore definitely should do. But every once in a while, I also have to go the opposite route and tell you what doesn't work and what you absolutely should not do. And I don't do that because I'm trying to be mean, but because these things are simply not helpful. So in this video, I want to share 3 common mistakes I see people making all the time when it comes to Bible study that prevent them from interpreting the Bible correctly and from experiencing the amazing beauty and depth this book has to offer. Mistake number 1, not taking the context into account. So this is probably one of the most common mistakes I see people making, and it's a real problem because when you don't take the context into account, you're in real danger of misinterpreting texts and applying them in ways they're not meant to be applied. And yet a lot of people just ignore the context, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way we view the Bible, like what we think the Bible is. And in some ways, the Bibles we use are not really helpful in that regard because they're divided into chapters and verses, and then we have headings that have been added, and in some Bibles, some verses are highlighted or printed in bold, and it makes us think that the Bible is a collection of inspirational sayings or life mottos we can put on our fridge or write in a greeting card, or a collection of laws and warnings we can beat other people over the head with, and that the biblical narratives are isolated moral tales with no connection to the surrounding material, when in reality it's one big story and everything is connected and has been placed very intentionally in that particular context. Which means if you really want to understand a certain text or a certain story and what the author wanted to communicate through that text or story, you always have to look at the context. Mistake number 2, interpreting texts from our point of view. This is also something I see people doing all the time, and one of the ways this often happens is that we judge texts or things that happen in the text purely on the basis of what we feel is appropriate or not. Noah pronouncing a curse because his son Ham saw him naked and told his brothers? Oh my goodness, that's like a complete overreaction. I mean, in our home we see each other naked all the time, so what's the big deal? And then he even curses Ham's son Canaan. How unfair is that? Or Elijah killing all those prophets of Baal? That is just so wrong. No wonder he got depressed afterwards. Or the way Joseph dealt with his brothers when they came to Egypt? I mean, sure, they treated him pretty badly, but did he really have to put them through all that? It just seems a bit too much. Or David telling God in the Psalms to destroy the wicked? Well, you know, at that point, David was still a bit spiritually immature. And the list could go on. Now, just in case you're wondering, these are not things I'm making up. These are actual things I'm hearing people say, and I could give you a lot more examples, and the thing is, these are not atheists. These are believers who are saying these things, and it's a real problem. And the problem is not that we actually evaluate things in the Bible, because I think we should do that. But the problem is that we evaluate things simply by the way we feel about them without ever taking the time to really study the text and trying to find out what's really going on. Instead, what we do is we arrogantly look down on the biblical characters because we obviously would have done things very differently. Now, do the people in the Bible always do what's right? Of course not. But that doesn't mean that everything we feel negatively about is actually problematic. The least we can do is to actually take a careful look at the text, because when we do that, we will often discover that things make a lot more sense than we first thought, and that the biblical characters are often far more intelligent than we think they are, and that they have something to teach us rather than the other way around. So listen, if this is something you are doing, I'm telling you right here, right now, please stop. Show some respect for the text. And the best way to do that is to actually study it for real. I know it's hard. I know it takes time, but it's the only way to go for people who believe that this is the inspired Word of God. Mistake number 3, getting to the application too quickly. So, many of us are practical people, and we live in a world where how-to manuals and quick fixes are super popular and often just a single mouse click away. You've got a problem? Here are 3 simple, easy ways to solve it. And because we're so used to that, we often treat the Bible the same way. We're like, you know, all this in-depth study and analysis of the text, that's all nice and stuff, but that's something theologians can do if they enjoy it. But I don't have time for that, and to be honest with you, I don't really care for it either. So don't bother me with that. Just tell me what it means for me, now, today. Get to the point, make it practical. Now don't misunderstand me. I'm all for practical application. And I do see the problem of being too theoretical and never dealing with the question what the text is saying to me or to us today. The issue I have is that too often I see people getting to that point way too fast without actually taking the time to really study the text carefully and to discover what the author is actually trying to get across. And then we end up misapplying texts and making them say things they're not saying at all. And that's a huge problem. I'm actually not really sure we realize how big of a problem that really is, because in the end we get to a point where you can pretty much interpret a text any way you want to, as long as it sounds reasonable or holy enough to the people you're interacting with. But there's another issue I have with this focus on quick practical application. It's not just that we might misinterpret the text, it's also that we lose out on the experience of recognizing and enjoying the incredible beauty and depth of the text. It's like standing in front of a painting, you know, one of those great masterpieces? Standing in front of that for like 10 seconds and going, okay, that was nice. Now what does it mean? That's how we often treat the Bible. And we completely miss out on the experience of sitting in front of that painting and actually noticing the details and the nuances and the shades of color that the painter intentionally put in there, and which in the end will help us to truly understand the message he's trying to get across. And even just noticing the beauty can already be such an extremely valuable experience that can bring us closer to God. So again, let's be practical when we study the Bible, but let's not jump the gun. Let's not be impatient and superficial Bible readers. Let's take the necessary time that these amazing texts actually deserve, and let's study them carefully and diligently. And I promise you, in the end, the application will be so much richer and deeper and relevant to your life on a truly existential level. All right, so did you catch what all these mistakes have in common? It's really two things. They're all the result of an at least partially wrong understanding of what the Bible actually is and how it works, and of a failure to actually take the time to really pay careful attention to the text. So if we want to avoid these mistakes, that's where we have to start. Respect the text. I'm going to say it over and over again. Show respect for the text. And the way to do that is to give it the attention it deserves and to approach it with a humble and a teachable spirit and a desire to really understand what this book is and how we should study it, so we can discover the amazing treasures that it contains. So as always, I want to encourage you to do just that. And if you want to learn more about how to study the Bible like that, then you need to check out this playlist right here, where I share some very practical Bible study tips. So go watch that next, and I'll see you there.